My parents kicked me out of the house and told me I was a disgrace to the family just for winning a science competition instead of joining the family business. Is this what you call success? Dad mocked. A trophy? 3 days later, a stranger at a conference said, "You're the girl from the news." So I took the stage. The next day, I gave them a shout-out they'll regret forever. "You think some shiny trophy means you're better than this family?" My dad growled, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "I didn't do this to spite you," I said, gripping the plaque like it was the only thing keeping me standing. "I did it because I love this. It's who I am." He laughed bitterly. "A disgrace. That's what you are." That was the last real conversation I had with either of my parents before they told me to pack my things and leave. I didn't cry when I stepped out of that house, I was too stunned to even breathe. But it didn't take long for the heartbreak to settle in. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, on a small plot of land just off the I-85 corridor, where my family had owned and operated a lumber business for generations. Langston's Timber and Milling wasn't just a company. To my parents, Arturo and Mire, it was a legacy, a sacred duty. Every Langston had worked there. My grandfather ran it until he died in his office chair, and my father picked up the mantle like it was his birthright. My parents didn't believe in passion projects or creative detours. There were only two kinds of people in their world, workers and freeloaders. They ran the business with a stern hand and expected me, their only child, to eventually take over once I was done with school nonsense. But school wasn't nonsense to me. From as far back as I could remember, I loved science. Not in the abstract, theoretical way, though that came later, but in the raw, exciting, let me break this old fan open and see how it works way. My room was filled with wires, small circuits, LED lights, and parts salvaged from junkyards. My parents didn't understand any of it. My dad called it tinkering. My mom just sighed and said, "You'll grow out of it." I didn't. High school gave me the chance to go further. My AP physics teacher, Dr. Soren Beckett, saw something in me and pushed me to take on bigger projects. He helped me enter regional science competitions. I'd spend weekends in his lab after school, testing out ideas and learning how to debug code. He was the first adult who ever looked at me and said, "You could do something great with this." That meant the world to me. The project that changed everything came in my senior year, a low-cost hydroelectric generator I'd built using salvaged bicycle parts and a repurposed water pump. I designed it for use in rural areas with inconsistent power grids. I had no budget, just curiosity and a lot of determination. I submitted it to the North Carolina Youth Science Expo on a whim. When I got the call saying I'd won first place statewide, I froze. My name was in newspapers. A local TV station even aired a small segment on me. My school was ecstatic. Dr. Beckett was over the moon. I was the first person in our district to win something of that scale. So I went home, bursting with pride, expecting, even hoping, for just a shred of approval. Instead, I walked into a storm. I remember every second of that night. My mom was sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, her fingers steepled like she was praying for patience. My dad came in from the mill, smelling of sawdust and smoke, still in his work boots. "You're all over the damn news," he said, not even bothering to sit down. "I know. Isn't it amazing?" I held out the plaque. "They're offering me interviews." A few college reps reached out. MIT, Stanford, even Georgia Tech. "Put that thing down," he snapped. I hesitated, then lowered it to my side. "You think a plaque changes who you are?" he said. "You think some shiny piece of metal means you don't owe this family what we gave you?" My voice shook. "I'm not saying that. But this is my future." My mother's voice was quiet but cutting. "So you're choosing science over us?" "I'm not choosing against you," I said, trying to hold it together. "I'm choosing for me." That's when he said it. "A disgrace to the Langston name. You were supposed to lead this family. Not run off to build toys and play genius on TV." I should have said more. Fought harder. But I didn't. That night, they gave me an ultimatum. Either I start apprenticing at the mill full-time or I leave. My room would be cleared. My car, a hand-me-down Chevy they'd promised was mine, would stay with them. They said if I walked out that door, I wasn't welcome back. I packed 2 duffel bags, slung them over my shoulder, and walked out. They didn't even watch me go. For the next few weeks, I couch-hopped between friends' places. I found a cheap, tiny room for rent near Chapel Hill and took a job at a used bookstore to cover it. I ate noodles 5 nights a week and skipped meals on the 6th. My laptop battery stopped holding a charge, so I'd do my work near outlets at the local library. I didn't hear from my parents once, not a single call, not even on my birthday. Dr. Beckett stayed in touch. He knew what had happened and quietly helped me apply to grants and scholarships. I was barely holding things together when he forwarded me an email, an invite to a National Sustainable Energy Conference in Asheville. They were giving out Youth Innovation Awards and wanted me to attend. I didn't have money for the bus, let alone a hotel. But they offered a travel stipend and 1-night stay. I said yes. When I arrived, I felt like an imposter. The room was full of people in suits with PhDs and startups already under their belts. I wore the same blazer I'd worn to my senior prom and carried a backpack with a broken zipper. I was walking through the lobby when a woman in a sleek blue suit paused in front of me, squinting. "You're the girl from the news, aren't you?" she asked. I blinked. Yeah, I guess." She grabbed my arm gently. "Follow me." One of our speakers dropped out. "You've got 10 minutes. You're going on stage." Everything blurred after that. I remember standing behind the curtain, palms sweaty, my heart racing in my chest like it was trying to escape. The spotlight hit my face, and for a moment, I wanted to run. But I didn't. I told my story. I talked about the generator, sure, but more than that, I talked about what it meant to build something that mattered when nobody believed in you. I talked about family, sacrifice, and the pain of choosing a path that isolated you from the people who raised you. I didn't name names. But I didn't need to. The audience stood and clapped. Not a polite clap, but a full standing ovation. I walked off stage trembling, overwhelmed. By that night, 3 university reps had emailed me. One even offered to help with housing assistance. A small angel investor asked to meet. And then came the interview. The next morning, I sat down for a live panel recording for a Youth Innovators segment. The interviewer was warm, bright-eyed, and relaxed. Until she asked, "Do you have anyone you want to thank for pushing you to this point?" I could have played it safe. I could have named teachers, friends, mentors. Instead, I said, yes. My parents. Arturo and Mary Langston. They kicked me out when I chose science over the family business. If they hadn't, I wouldn't be here. So thank you, for making me leave, and forcing me to build my life from the ground up. The camera zoomed in slightly. I smiled. Turns out, a trophy can take you pretty far. The interview aired later that week, and I didn't think much of it at first. I was too busy juggling calls from universities and trying to find a long-term place to live. But I knew something had shifted when my phone started buzzing nonstop one afternoon at the bookstore. Friends. Old classmates. Even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. My name had blown up online. The video of my panel was circulating on Facebook, Reddit, YouTube. Someone had clipped the part where I said my parents kicked me out and uploaded it with the title, "Science Prodigy Disowned by Parents Gets the Last Word." I didn't realize how many people related to that story until the comment section started flooding in. Hundreds, then thousands, of messages from people who had also been told they were throwing their lives away for following their passions. Kids who loved art, writing, tech. Adults who still felt the weight of parental disappointment decades later. My inbox became a stream of encouragement, solidarity, and a surprising number of offers, from housing to funding to mentorship. But not everyone was cheering. A friend from back in Charlotte texted me a screenshot of Langston's Timber and Milling's Facebook page. Someone had linked the video in the comments of their latest post. "Is this the daughter you kicked out?" one person wrote. Others followed. It wasn't just a few messages, it turned into a full-on call-out. Yelp reviews started to turn, many referencing how they treat their own blood. Their Google listing was hit next. One person left a 1-star review and wrote, "Apparently this place values tradition more than their children's futures." Hard pass. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a dark, deep satisfaction in watching it all unfold. For a moment. Then the guilt started to creep in. I hadn't meant for it to become public shame. I hadn't named them to hurt them, I'd been honest. But the internet did what it always does, and now it was spiraling out of my control. A week later, I got an email from our old family pastor. Short and simple, "Saw your interview. We're proud of you. For what it's worth, your father watches your speeches when he thinks no one's around." I stared at that line for what felt like forever. I hadn't cried since the night they kicked me out. Not when I was sleeping on couches, not when I was scraping coins for gas. Not even when I stood on that stage. But that email cracked something open. The idea that he still watched me, still cared, in some way, sent me into a spiral I wasn't prepared for. The weight of it all hit me at once. The betrayal, the abandonment, the loneliness of chasing a dream when the people who should have been your first supporters are the ones who made you choose between them and yourself. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. Over the next few months, my life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I accepted a full scholarship to Stanford. The small angel investment from that conference helped me develop a more advanced prototype of the hydro generator. Within 6 months, I had meetings with nonprofits looking to distribute them in remote communities across Appalachia and parts of Central America. I wasn't just the girl from the news anymore. I was becoming someone who could build real change. I moved into university housing and found a quiet peace in that new life. I stayed busy, maybe too busy, as a way to not think about home. But home has a way of creeping back in. It came one afternoon in the form of a package. No return address. Just a plain brown box left outside my dorm. Inside, I found my old childhood journal. The leather-bound one I used to scribble experiments and notes in, the one I thought my parents had thrown away. Tucked between the pages was a yellowed envelope with nothing on it. Inside, a folded sheet of paper, handwritten. "We didn't know how to be proud of something we didn't understand. That's not your fault. We saw the news. I guess we were wrong." That was it. No name, no apology, no invitation to reconnect. Just that. And still, it felt like a 1,000-pound boulder lifting off my chest. But I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to bridge that gap. I wasn't even sure I wanted to. Because the truth is, once you've been exiled for simply being yourself, it's hard to believe that acceptance can be real. Not when it comes too late, and only after the world tells them they were wrong. I carried that note with me for weeks, tucked into my planner. I told myself I wouldn't think about it, but of course I did. Every night, like clockwork. Stanford was a whirlwind. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who got it, people who saw the world the same way I did, who found magic in equations and potential in parts. I built friendships that weren't based on blood or proximity but mutual respect. I thrived. I started to see a future for myself, not just in science, but in building systems that gave people options. People like me, who had to fight for the right to dream. The generator was picked up for further development by a nonprofit organization focused on sustainable tech for low-income communities. They invited me to be on the advisory board. I started traveling to rural Kentucky, parts of Guatemala, even Nepal, installing prototypes and teaching locals how to maintain them. It was everything I'd ever wanted. And still, every milestone made me wonder if somewhere, back in Charlotte, my parents saw the headlines or heard my name again. I imagined Arturo in his office, watching an interview on his phone with the volume low, pride buried under decades of tradition. Mireille, maybe, flipping through a magazine with my face in it, unsure how to say the words she'd never said. I'm sorry. It's funny how we chase success to prove something to people who once made us feel like we were nothing. But the more I achieved, the less I needed them to see it. I began chasing impact instead of validation. And yet, I couldn't fully shake them. There were moments, quiet ones, when their absence hit the hardest. Like when I walked across the stage to receive my Stanford diploma, and every other student had someone cheering from the seats. I smiled at the camera, shook the dean's hand, and walked back to my chair with an empty space in my chest. The applause felt hollow without the faces I once longed to see in the crowd. I'd told myself I didn't need them anymore, but deep down, I still carried their silence like a weight. The truth is, I hadn't stopped being their daughter. I had just learned how to live without their approval. After graduation, things picked up quickly. I moved to Berkeley for a residency program in environmental engineering and sustainable systems. I took up a fellowship that focused on expanding green energy access in urban low-income neighborhoods. My generator, now refined through multiple iterations and field-tested across 3 continents, was being licensed for broader use. I gave talks, traveled, spoke on panels. My name appeared in articles, small ones at first, then eventually bigger features in Wired, The Atlantic, even Forbes. Every new opportunity was a mix of joy and quiet grief. I had so many people standing with me, mentors, friends, colleagues. But the people who had raised me still weren't there. Then, one day in early fall, a familiar name showed up in my inbox. Langston_MillingNC@outlook.com. The subject line was blank. No message, just a photo attachment. It was the storefront of the mill. But something had changed. The weathered old sign that once read Langston's Timber and Milling now read Langston Renewable Supply underneath, in smaller lettering, a family business rooted in change. I stared at the screen for a long time. The rebranding was unmistakable. I clicked the attachment several times, half expecting it to vanish. It didn't. I didn't reply. Not right away. I didn't know how to. I wasn't sure what this meant. Was it an olive branch? A guilt offering? Or just a business move trying to capitalize on a daughter who'd accidentally become a symbol? I called Dr. Beckett that night. He still checked in with me every few months, always with that same gentle tone, like a parrot I had borrowed from the universe. They renamed the business, I said, sitting on the floor of my apartment, staring at my laptop. He paused. They used the word renewable? Yeah. He gave a short laugh. I'm not sure what to say. Are you okay? No, I said. But also, yes. A few weeks later, I got another message. This one came through my professional email, addressed formally to my full name. It was from a law firm in Charlotte. My stomach dropped when I saw the name. Langston and Dyer, PLLC. The letter, when I opened it, wasn't angry. It wasn't a cease and desist or a demand. It was a request. Ms. Langston, we are writing on behalf of Arturo and Mireille Langston, who have expressed a desire to discuss a possible business partnership with you regarding sustainable energy integration into Langston's operations. Please note that this outreach is made in good faith and under no legal duress. Should you wish to initiate a dialogue, our clients are willing to meet at a time and place of your convenience. I laughed out loud. Business partnership. After all that. They wanted to talk. Not as parents. As entrepreneurs. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. Or both. For 2 days, I ignored the message. On the 3rd day, I forwarded it to my advisor with a simple question: what do you make of this? She wrote back, this could be opportunity, or closure. Or maybe both. I didn't know what I wanted from them. Part of me wanted to walk into their boardroom in heels and a blazer and tell them this is what a disgrace looks like now. Another part of me wanted to walk away entirely, to prove I didn't need their validation, their money, or their mills. But I also couldn't deny what I'd seen in that photo. The name change. The subtle nod. It felt like a signal, not just to me but to the world, that maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to understand the thing they'd so harshly rejected. I asked for a Zoom meeting. I wasn't ready to go back to Charlotte. Not yet. But I was ready to hear their voices again. The call was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. I sat in my home office, laptop open, heart pounding in my ears. When their faces appeared on the screen, I nearly shut the lid. Arturo looked older. Not just aged, but diminished. Like a man who had carried too much pride for too long and finally set some of it down. His shirt was tucked in, but his collar was slightly crooked, like he'd dressed himself too quickly. Miri's hair was grayer than I remembered, pulled into a low twist. She looked tired. We stared at each other for a few seconds in silence before anyone spoke. "Hi," I said first, because no one else did. Miri gave a small nod. "Hi." Arturo cleared his throat. "You look well." "I am." More silence. He glanced down, then back at the camera. "We saw what you built. It's impressive. More than impressive." I gave the smallest nod. "Thanks." "We weren't prepared," he said. "We didn't know how to handle it. When you chose that path, we thought," he hesitated. "We thought it meant you were rejecting us." I didn't answer. Miri leaned forward slightly. "It was hard for us to understand. Still is. But we made some changes. We've partnered with a sustainability firm. Started converting a portion of our operations to eco-focused supply. We used your name. But only because we thought it would matter." "You didn't ask," I said, quietly. "No," she said. "We didn't." Another pause. "We want to fix things," she added. I exhaled slowly. "You can't." The silence after that was long and thick. "But we can start," I said, surprising myself. Arturo's eyes met mine. "We'd like that." I didn't smile. I wasn't ready. But I didn't close the laptop either. Later that night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at my ceiling. My phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. "Still proud of that trophy?" I stared at it for a minute, then typed back. "Every day." No reply came. And that was fine. The weeks that followed were a strange limbo. We didn't speak often, me and my parents, but that Zoom call opened a door, even if only a crack. A few cautious emails trickled in. Short, formal, sometimes awkward. Miri sent an old photo of me in middle school, standing in front of my first science fair project. "Found this in the garage," she wrote. No punctuation, no sentimentality. Still, I saved it. Arturo forwarded an article about timber companies pivoting toward eco-products. "Thought this might interest you." Again, no small talk, no questions about my life or how I was doing. But it was something. A few people I trusted, my advisor, a fellow founder, even Dr. Beckett, asked me what I wanted from all of this. Did I want reconciliation? Partnership? Or just closure? I didn't know. I still don't. What I did know was that I didn't want to make decisions from spite anymore. I'd spent so much of my early adulthood working hard to prove something, that I was worthy, capable, that my choices were valid. And in the process, I'd built a life that had real meaning. But I also knew there was a younger version of me, somewhere deep inside, who still wanted her parents to say, "We're proud of you," and mean it. Not for what I did, but for who I became. Around December, an opportunity came up to speak at a regional energy expo in Charlotte. When I saw the invite in my inbox, I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the archive button. Declining it would have been easy. Justified, even. But something in me itched at the idea of going back, not for them, not for their approval, but on my own terms. I accepted the invite. The event was to be held at the convention center downtown, not far from where I used to go for church potlucks as a kid. I hadn't stepped foot in Charlotte since I left that night with 2 duffel bags and no plan. Now I was coming back with a keynote badge and a presentation about the future of localized renewable infrastructure. Talk about full circle. I didn't tell my parents I was coming. I didn't want them to feel obligated. Or worse, feel like I was extending an olive branch that I wasn't ready to offer. The morning of the event, I checked into a modest hotel across the city. It was strange how familiar everything felt: the streets, the food, even the smell of the winter air in that part of North Carolina. It didn't bring me comfort. It brought a kind of quiet tension, like I was sitting in a version of the past I no longer belonged to. My panel was scheduled for the afternoon. The hall was smaller than the national events I'd gotten used to, but still packed. People filed into the rows, murmuring softly, programs in hand. A few recognized me before I took the podium. Someone waved. Another gave me a thumbs up. I took a deep breath and began. I talked about energy poverty, climate adaptation, and how small interventions could create real change in overlooked places. I showed photos from fieldwork in Kentucky and Ecuador, kids learning to wire circuits using parts from our kits. I talked about how innovation wasn't just about invention, it was about access. Equity. The right to shape your own future. Then, near the end, I paused. I hadn't written this part. It wasn't in my slides. But it came out anyway. There's something powerful about coming back to a place that once told you your dreams were too strange to fit, I said. Not to prove them wrong, but to show yourself you were right to believe. The room went still. I didn't look out into the audience until I'd finished. And when I did, I saw them. Arturo and Mireille, sitting 3 rows from the front. Not together. But both there. Arturo's hands were folded tightly, knuckles white. Mireille clutched a notebook in her lap, her face unreadable. I didn't falter. I didn't cry. I just stepped away from the mic and let the applause carry the weight I couldn't. Afterward, I slipped through the back and found a quiet corner near the exit. My heart pounded, but I felt steady. Grounded. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. Arturo stood a few feet behind me. I could hear him adjusting his coat, clearing his throat in that way he always had when he didn't know what to say. Then, quietly, he asked, "Got a minute?" I turned slowly. Nodded once. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "We saw your talk." I nodded again. "I know." Mireille appeared next, walking up slowly, her hands now in her coat pockets. For a long beat, none of us said anything. Finally, she broke the silence. "You spoke well," she said. "You made sense of things. More than I expected." I studied her face. It wasn't praise, exactly. But it wasn't dismissal either. Arturo stepped closer, then held out something I didn't expect. A small, rectangular box. Worn, wood-paneled, with my initials carved crudely on the front. I opened it. Inside was the old soldering iron I used in high school. The one they took away the day they cleared out my room. I remembered every scratch on its handle. "I thought it might mean something to you," he said. I closed the box. Looked up at him. "It did," I said. "It still does." But I didn't smile. I didn't say thank you. I wasn't sure if I could. Later that evening, back in my hotel room, I sat with the box in my lap, staring at it like it held more than just metal and plastic. Like it was a piece of the past I wasn't sure how to carry anymore. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if this moment was the beginning of healing, or just a mutual truce. A quiet agreement that we'd stop trying to change each other. But for the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel sharp. It just felt quiet. The morning after the conference, I woke up to a letter slipped under the door of my hotel room. The envelope was cream-colored, hand-addressed in pen, just my first name. Inside, a folded page, no official letterhead or stiff formality. Just words, awkward, uneven, but real. We won't pretend like we weren't wrong. We were. For a long time. We thought loyalty looked like obedience. We thought legacy meant repeating what came before. But we watched you yesterday. We've been watching. You made something that didn't come from us, but it came from you. And that's what legacy should be. We're proud of you. We don't expect forgiveness. But if there's room in your life, we'd like to be part of it again. Mom and Dad. I stared at the letter for a long time. Part of me still didn't trust it. It had taken years to even get here. And maybe it was easier to believe the worst in them than risk the heartbreak of hoping they'd changed for real. But something about the humility in those words. It felt different. Or maybe I was different. That day, I made a decision. A few months later, I invited them to the launch event of my company's biggest milestone yet, a new partnership with a major nonprofit to distribute our latest microhydro units across the rural South. The venue was in Atlanta. We had national press there. Lawmakers. Engineers. Philanthropists. And my parents standing quietly in the back row. This time, I didn't hide my story. I leaned into it. As I stepped on stage, I welcomed the crowd, thanked our funders, and then paused, looking across the sea of unfamiliar faces to the two that shaped my whole story. When I was 17, I came home with a trophy, one that I believed symbolized hope, innovation, and a future I'd built with my own hands. That night, my family told me I was a disgrace. That if I walked away from their world, I'd lose them forever. The room went completely still. I could feel the tension. But life has a funny way of reshaping even the hardest chapters. Because without that rejection, I never would have left. And if I hadn't left, I never would have stood here. Not as someone begging for approval, but as someone who created something that matters. I took a beat, then looked directly at Arturo and Mireille. So today, I want to thank my parents for kicking me out. For doubting me. For making me strong enough to believe in myself when no one else did. A few quiet gasps swept the audience. People glanced toward the back row. My parents didn't move. Didn't speak. Mireille pressed her lips together, her eyes glassy. Arturo dropped his gaze. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. But I didn't turn away. I stood tall and let every word sit there, echoing. Because your doubt became my fire. Your silence became my motivation. And now, your legacy? It's in my hands. Not because I followed your path, but because I forged my own. The applause started slowly, polite, confused, and then swelled, like the room itself had exhaled with me. It roared. People stood. I held the mic steady and gave a small, final nod before walking off the stage. After the event, reporters circled, shaking my hand, asking for quotes. I gave a few, but kept looking back at that quiet corner of the room. Eventually, they came over. Arturo spoke first. You said what you needed to say, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Loud and clear. Mireille, though, smiled faintly. There was sadness in it, but not bitterness. You were right to say it, she said. Even if it hurt. I looked at her, then him. I wasn't trying to hurt you, I said honestly. But I was trying to make you listen. She nodded. We heard you. And that was enough. Not forgiveness. Not family dinners or hugs or a picture-perfect reunion. Just acknowledgement. The truth said out loud, without flinching. That's what revenge looked like for me. Not ruining them. Not crushing their business or humiliating them. Just rising, on my own terms, in full view of the people who said I'd never make it. Langston Renewable Supply is still running. Last I heard, they partnered with a local green building initiative in North Carolina. They even installed solar panels on the roof of the old mill. I smiled when I saw the photo online. As for me, I moved to Colorado, opened a second branch of ResiFlow Energy, and began mentoring young women in STEM who don't have supportive families. Girls with big dreams and no safety nets. I tell them, don't wait for them to understand. Don't wait for them to clap. Build anyway. Rise anyway. Because that's the most satisfying kind of revenge. Not spite. Success. And every time someone says, "You're that girl from the news, right?" I smile and say, "Not anymore. Now, I'm the woman who made it."